Boy, do I have a story for you. Okay, this is part two of the vulnerability and de-armoring episode because when I wrote that or told that, because that episode's basically a story of what had happened maybe like the last 72 hours or so, or like earlier that week. But okay, so then I it was so interesting, right? That I like share this message and talk about all these things that are on my heart and like what I'm seeing. And then the last few weeks, the way things have unfolded around this theme, I literally have my journal right here and I'm going to walk you through because I journal almost every day, especially now that I'm traveling, going out to restaurants and different places. I bring my journal. And so I always like have this companion, something to do besides be on my phone. But I also love to journal just at my home or in the evening. I've always done it for so many years. And so this is one of those times where, and I love to go back over it. That's one of those things because they say hindsight is 2020, but also you're always viewing things through the lens of how you see them now and what you're experiencing now. And that actually even goes into one of the pages in here. So let's get into this story. This is probably going to be pretty long, but we'll see. It's very spontaneity filled, very spontaneous, and but it's a wild story. It's a wild story. So I do recommend listening to episode one. If not, the like short version of it was the story of me walking around El Centro, the historic part of Cartagena, and having all of these huge epiphanies around vulnerability and love. And like, you're a fool if you choose to love and trust people, and you're a fool if you choose to not love and trust people. So, which are you going to choose? And how it's up to you, and how are you going to be confident in what you choose? And I really came back to intuition. And one of the things that I talked about in that episode was muscle testing. And so it's where you like, or how I do it has been to loop my fingers together, like I'm making an okay symbol, and pull on them anytime I'm making a decision or whatever. But already at this point of this is now uh, 3 to 4 weeks later after that. So the muscle testing, it has actually become so automatic. I don't have to even do that with my fingers now. I can just tell in my body which decision is like would have the strength of the strong pull and which one would have the like would I not really like give into. And it's like already without even having to do it with my fingers do I do that. And also I've been reading, I just saw this here next to my bed. I've been reading Haroon and the Sea of Stories, and that book was given to me a decade ago in 2015, maybe early 2016, but so basically 10 years ago. That book was given to me and I never read it because the person that gave it to me was like, "Oh, you love storytelling, you're passionate about storytelling. Here is a book about the power of storytelling." And so crazy that I'm reading it now at by the sea and on my Beaches Not Borders venture, and learning so much about vulnerability and love as we're talking about here, but how that even comes to this and sharing my voice and telling this story and reading from my journal. Like, I won't read everything, and this is just a pro tip for anyone out there. You can still have parts of your life be private and be an authentic person. You don't have to let everyone in on anything. Now, that's not saying to be deceptive by any means, but you don't have to share everything. So I'm not going to share everything. Some things are kind of private to me, and so that's just how it's going to be. But you're going to get the like pretty much all of the story part of it. Yeah, okay, so let's go. So I have here at the end of uh this, oh yeah, so just to wrap it up on the book was amazing and I finished it in this middle of this cycle, so in about the last month of being on this venture, and it's crazy to read that book now a year later, and or a decade after being given it, and being able to, wow, I'm just like literally my mind is spinning. So let's go into this story. So I'm starting here on September 6th on this entry, and then uploaded the new episode and season cover. So because also with that episode I started season 3 of this show, and so it's beautiful to be here sharing this story, and very vulnerably from my journal, because this is 1,000% authentic to me, what's everything that's in here. um and so, yeah, feeling things. Okay. But so just, all right. Here's this is wild to me. I'm also like realizing this as I read it, as I read different things. So then September 7th, I write, all I remember from my dream was being in paradise, saying to the person I'm with, aren't you glad we made it to the islands? Like we'd been waiting for something and building, and here it was. We were swimming in turquoise water with white sand beside us. And okay, so that that is such a you're not gonna get to hear why that's significant, why I'm blown away now looking back at September 7th and I'm filming this on October 5th, why that is wild to me. But then I'm go get tacos, and the woman who sells them to me, her name is Osiris, like Osiris, which is Lord of the Dead, Osiris. And at that time, this must have been the oh right, that was the full moon in Pisces, because this is the full moon in Aries. Wow. Okay, so that was the full moon in Pisces, and I pulled from one of my decks, and what I had pulled was proper burial for freedom. So again, this is all after I've recorded that episode. But we start from whenever I published uploaded it, published it, told the story, and so this is my life now, a month after uploading it, and everything that I've learned about that topic, because it was a little inconclusive. It was a little bit like, yeah, okay, like here's what we know about love, but you've got to surrender. Okay, well, what, okay, because first things first, another thing that I talk about in that episode, I said first thing first, even though we're like well into it, but hop with me. We're going to jump around a little bit, but it's going to be amazing. One of the first things that we have to talk about was how this last week, so I'm now on October 5th, this last week was when the Global Samud Flotilla, a bunch of humanitarians bringing aid completely legally to Gaza, to people who are in such desperate need of it, innocent lives being lost in this occupied land, and just such the genocide that's happening is so tragic and terrible. And here is this hope, this flotilla. And I talked about this in the last episode a month ago. When I published that episode, they were leaving on that Sunday, was whenever the first round of boats were leaving. So that was a month ago, right? Okay, then forward to this last week, so about 3-ish weeks ago, was when they were actually landing, except that they didn't get to make land. All boats were intercepted by the IOF, and completely illegally, these are international waters. They took all of the stuff from their boats, all of the aid and stuff like that, took the boats. I don't know how many actually today are released, but I believe many were taken to prison. I know some of them have been released, but this is like almost 500 people from countries around the world, and government still hardly did anything. Colombia is one of the few countries with a ruler who is actually speaking out against this. Um, but so the flotillas, and like no government has really taken action. But in that last episode, because they're all about to embark, that was a part of what I was thinking about so much with vulnerability and loving and being open to love and being able to risk your own life going all the way to that way, because I was in a church and I was watching this couple get married, and that is such a huge risk in and of itself, to be able to love another person and to put your heart out there for them, and like this core of humanity that I was seeing in these different places, all the way to myself in this journey that I have been on, and then seeing it in this couple, that in that church, and then all the way to the flotilla that was leaving. And so in this last week, in I was just thinking, I was like, maybe I should have saved this for the end, but no, we'll get into my personal stuff later. But I just have to share one of the beautiful things about that. So as much it's absolutely terrible that the ships, and it just proves so many things of what so many people have been saying for so long, about what is happening over there. And so the fact that all of these boats were illegally intercepted, people kidnapped, yeah, some of the hundreds of people have gone home to my knowledge at this point. But okay, what happened was, while all of the boats were being while all of the navy and stuff were taking the boats, the people in Gaza were actually able to fish, because in the war, I guess for some reason, for some terrible reason, I'm sure, but I'm sure they have one, the people in Gaza can't even fish, can't go into the water, but the boats were occupied. So even though every single boat on that flotilla was intercepted, even though more are coming, and it has sparked so much transformation, at least hopefully, that things that I've been able to start to see. They were able to catch fish, and it's beautiful. Maybe I'll be able to crop it over in this episode. So if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify or wherever this is playing, you can see the video if you have the video version. So there's just like this huge net, and it's full of fish. There's an abundance of fish, and everyone looks so happy and so focused, and so like we're gonna get every ounce that we can out of, like everyone is so focused and working together so beautifully, and they get all of this fish. So people were fed. And so that's crazy that we're on the other side of just that story, especially if you go back and listen to the other story and where they were setting off, because also why that took almost 3 weeks. Like they ran into all different kinds of issues. These boats are things that I don't know. Well, they're relying on donations, and I guess some of that is the boats, and then some that they're able to pay for, but these aren't like nice boats that they were on. Like, so different things were breaking, and just it's still all eyes on Gaza. Like it hasn't changed the situation, but there was this they did, people work together, and through their love, see, and man, I got emotional in the other episode too, when people work together and we step into our power and we love each other. And it's challenging and it's so uncomfortable, but it's so worth it. And so, anyway, back to September 7th and this proper burial for freedom. And I think I knew at the time, meeting Osiris, the Lord of the Dead. Okay. And then September 10th, dude, last night was so fun. Champeta, baby. I took a dance class, and I knew one of the things that I wanted to do while I was here was take a champeta dance class, salsa dance class, take some dance classes in new styles I haven't really explored before. And so I was really excited about that. And this is like, I'm here maybe a few weeks at this point, and I just picked this Tuesday that I'm like, I have to go to Champeta tonight. I have to go take this class tonight. And I found this experience where they had a class and you got to learn about the history of it and stuff like that, and take this class. So I meet these two amazing women. We go out for dinner. We totally connect after the class, and then we go out dancing, and we had so much fun because I haven't been out as much as I love to go dancing. I like to go out, especially with other people. And that so to have these gals to go out with was so much fun, and we really connected. And then the next day, oh, and also I start doing my friend's yoga. She did this yoga flow called Christy, who's been on the podcast. Oh, I'll link it. Did this great yin yoga flow around belonging. And as you're doing this like 90-minute practice, you're thinking about belonging. And she thinks of it as like, or talks about it especially as be long. So you're be and then long, and all the ways that you can interpret long. And one of the affirmations that really came out of that I started using around this full moon was I belong and am longed for. And so really going into this sense of belonging and feeling belonging, and that helps so much with vulnerability and de-armoring. When you feel you belong, when you feel you're connected, whenever you feel you're in touch, then you're able to be vulnerable, you're able to de-armor, because again, you're able to trust your intuition. And a lot of that feeling of safety brings on that ability to trust your intuition and to hear that really clearly. And that day then, so the next day after Champeta, I saw something online about someone that revealed to me this is where it's like, okay, this some of this stuff is private, that revealed to me some things where I had been deceived by someone, and not super blatantly and not really terribly, but it was like, oh, that was this thing that my intuition was telling me, but I did not have proof of. I got the proof of it that day, and it just made me so grateful for my intuition, because I had acted on my intuition, and I was so glad that I had. And so like really reflecting on that, and how many times I had betrayed myself in the past in situations like that. And so that was that proper burial for freedom. It was this sense of releasing so much around the not belonging, and then ultimately not getting to be myself. Like one of the things she talked about in the yoga flow, I believe she might have been quoting Brene Brown, that belonging is the opposite of fitting in. Think about that. Belonging is the opposite of fitting in. And so it's this ability, when you belong, you're able to be yourself, you're able to be true to yourself, you're able to be authentic. And I was just having all of these realizations about times that I betrayed myself in the past. And of these two women who I'd met the night before, only one of them was able to go to dinner with me the next night. But we ended up having, it was so beautiful that I was in this raw, I'd been crying a lot. Also, just as I'm driving to dinner, I start crying, realizing that I'm gonna have a dream in Spanish one day. I'm learning so much more and more Spanish. And I was like, I'm gonna have a dream in Spanish. Like, especially if you're familiar with this podcast, you know, I'm all about the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs that we hold. And part of that burial for freedom is around the stories that I tell myself, to the point that I'm learning a new language. The stories, the word, down to the word, the palabras are different. It's all coming so differently. And I was just, if I felt this shedding and this release, because also it was like super exciting to get off on this voyage, but then came the actual, like, I miss my friends and family. Wow, this isn't just a vacation. This is my life now. Like, all of that was settling in around this point too. But like, how glad I was for these things that I was doing for myself. And then I have therapy, and I love my therapist. She's witchy and badass. And before I have therapy, this is the next day, after I have dinner with my friend, my new friend, my second new friend, I'm going to therapy. And before therapy that night, I have a dream where I go through, well, first I was getting an IUD removed, except that the IUD was a parasite. And I don't have one, but I have had one, and that's and I felt so much more myself after I got it out. And hormonally, I've been so into it. That's a whole nother story, what I've done with my hormones in the last 6 months. But it was interesting that in this dream, this IUD was coming out, and when it came out, it was a parasite. And I remember just being angry in the dream that this was even happening, that I was in so much pain. I've also had, this is vulnerable. I've also had a leap surgery, which is when they cauterize your cervix to remove precancerous cells. And I've been all clear, and all hopefully will remain super healthy there. That is absolutely what I feel I have now, and hopefully what I will continue to have is a nice healthy cells. But in but it was such a painful experience. I was awake for it because for having my cervix cauterized, I was awake for it because, oh, this is, I guess, the trigger warning part. Maybe I'll put one in the caption or something like that. Talks about sensitive things. Um, because in this hospital, it was a Baptist or Catholic or something hospital. And so uh, they couldn't do something with birth control in the main hospital where they would have put me under. So I had to have it in this women's clinic where they could not put me under. So I was on one painkiller, and they cauterized my cervix, and it was so incredibly painful. And I was at we could go into a whole thing about like the chakras, the energy centers, and your reproductive organs, and things that can be transforming around your energy during that. But this was just a snippet of it in this dream, or it reminded me of that. And then when I was leaving, I couldn't leave through the door. They like made me leave through the doggy door. There was like a doggy door. Okay, notice that, doggy. And then anyway, we have this great thing, or great rest of the therapy session. And one of the things she pulled was Emperor in reverse. And it really, that came up so much. I don't know. There are a lot of details here. And so maybe I'll start to leave some of them out because it's crazy, especially as I'm just looking back over this. And I'm going to tell it all in all. And she tells me to watch the film Pervert's Guide to Cinema. And it's this guy's analysis of, he's like a psychoanalyst and a philosopher, and it's his view of cinema and how it shapes what we desire. And she tells me to watch that movie because one of the things that we were talking about was, she had said, wanting brings more wanting, having brings more having. And I had felt myself in this place of like, why I only have want if what I'm desiring is actually not what I have, because I have such a beautiful life and have so much beauty around me. I have. Look, I'm saying it. I have, not just I want, but I have. And we were talking about desire and stuff. And so then we start to go into, and there'll be more on that. Um, but okay, so that kind of wraps it up with the that therapy session and then that day. And then I read something on social media that shook me to my core, back to the doggy door part of that dream, okay? And this woman said, women who carry water for the patriarchy just so they can have a slightly longer leash and stand a few rungs up in oppression from other women, particularly marginalized women, make me a special kind of angry. Being master's favorite dog is still having a master and being a dog. And I was thinking about that dream, and especially that it was on my reproductive organs. And for me, creativity is my favorite reproductive creative, like reproductive organs is creative energy, and my creative energy is so precious to me. This whole podcast is about creativity. And so thinking back to that dream and the doggy door, and it being like the creativity still being the part, so back to the burial for freedom, what was really dying for me was trying to be master's favorite dog, was trying to be good enough. That, like, so then the next thing after wrote I wrote after I wrote down that quote, if you know who wrote that originally, comment, tag him, message me. I apologize that I didn't write down your name, sorry. um I didn't think I'd be reading this on my podcast. Proper burial for freedom is what I wrote right after that. And so then I go out for dinner, and then, okay, here, how much do I want to share? And a man gives me a rose, and we have this like nice exchange. And there, it just became, I started to have options for being vulnerable. Back to how, like, the vulnerability and de-armoring. What do I want to be vulnerable in? And then the next day, I go and see a movie. And this isn't all I do on these days. I'm just trying to link together the things for the story. And I go see a movie, the new Demon Slayer movie, and it's Infinity Castle. And it was here, but in Japanese with Spanish subtitles. So thank goodness I am much better at reading Spanish than I am listening to Spanish or speaking Spanish. And so I was listening to it in Japanese, which I don't know at all. And then I'm reading it in Spanish, and I could totally follow along, and it felt like such a win. Here's even a moment. Who do I trust? Naturally, this comes up a week after my vulnerability and de-armoring episode. And what I did was I pulled some cards, because I had this situation where I was like, okay, I got a few different people to trust, some opportunities arise. How do I want to decide? So I pulled cards. First thing to pop up, the Emperor. And what did I say about my tarot reader? Well, she does incorporate tarot, but she's also an amazing therapist and completely certified therapist. Licensed, I think is what it is, not certified. Anyway, always check out that kind of stuff. But she's awesome. And she had pulled the Emperor in reverse. And here I'd pulled the Emperor first, and then I'd pulled like a bunch of other cards around it. And so interesting that this like Emperor coming up, as it's so often related to the masculine. And then I almost went to the islands with the other friend who I met, not the one I was able to go to dinner with, because they both then went to Cali to learn salsa, or learn more salsa. And then the other one left, and the well the other friend, who I wasn't able to have dinner with, she was like, I'm gonna come back to Cartagena, let's go to the islands. But then she was like, actually, I'm gonna extend my stay, so never mind. And then I'm part of this thing called Circle, which, again, Christy, shout out, number 2 this episode. And I bet you're gonna listen, so text me. I love you. So I I got to co-facilitate one of these things called Circle. And Circle is something that Christy invited me to, that her and her friend Nala, I believe it was just those two, who started, which is to gather in a circle. And there are guidelines that they use some different books for, but we read through the guidelines, and it's basically like, you hold space for each other, you can't talk over each other, you can't actually give advice. If someone wants to share something and have no one say anything after, just someone else go, then that's totally up to them. Or you can say, oh, open or cup up, that you're lifting up your cup and you're welcome to receive what people say. And so it's just holding space, just letting people talk and having other people listen. And we do this little grounding exercise at the beginning, or a digital altar. That's what we do, because we do it all over Zoom. So we do this digital altar where everyone brings something. And so all of this stuff, what these like few, besides the actual sharing, like the digital altar, and then the grounding practice, then as the share, and then as a closing thing. And they have co-facilitators because Christy and Nala can't always do it, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a circle. We all share, and like, so already think about the matriarchy of that versus the patriarchy. Again, going back to the emperor and emperor reversed. So think, if you think of emperor or like hierarchy as in like empire, and patriarchy, then if you think of circle and feminine, it's not, that's why when people are like, oh, we need a matriarchy, not a patriarchy, it's not just we need women at the top of the pyramid now instead of men at the top of a pyramid. It's no, we need to go from pyramid to circle, to sharing, to I have, you have, we have. Together we do this. And so this was my turn to co-facilitate, and I did it with another girl, Alyssa, and we had a great collab session planning it out. And what we wanted to do was, and this is, I had that rose from that guy like sitting there, and I was like, okay, here's this great exercise, your rose and your thorn. So everyone for their digital altar brought their rose and they brought their thorn. And so like the rose was the beautiful part of your life, and then what is this thorn, what is the thing that is actually like then really uncomfortable about that beautiful thing, and how everything goes hand in hand like that. And then we did a grounding practice where you embodied your rose and your thorn. You were like, how does it make me feel? And really interesting, this is going to click for a lot of you, you're going to be like, oh duh, because this is how I listen to my body. It was like the rose, it was always some big expansive movement that we did. And then for the thorn, it was always something that made them small or feel little, like always for everyone's different things that they picked to embody their rose and their thorn. It would be like that, where it would be like really big for the rose and then small. So if you think again of going back to your intuition or pulling hard on the muscle testing, so doing the muscle testing to recognize, that's again, it's like, what's the strong, what makes me feel stall, what the rose, the big part, and then the what makes me feel small about that. What we did was we drew a line on the page where we, so it was like along along the page, and it had past, present, and future. And so we wrote where we were today, and then the past and the future. And I that day had a really interesting conversation with someone about something that could potentially have been like a dream project for me. And so it was like really interesting to talk to that person again when I was talking about all these opportunities that have been coming in and out and that kind of thing. And all these different things that I'm working out. So there, I have my present moment and then my past and my future. And for me, I wrote what I realized after I'd written everything down was, and then we shared it in the circle. But what, after I wrote everything down, I realized that the past felt like wanting, and on the future is having. And it feels like that's like this big, the proper burial for freedom is around wanting, and like I said, the hierarchy and this separation and fear, letting go of that, going back to vulnerability and de-armoring, like letting go of fear, the proper burial of fear, and trying to be enough and trying to belong and wanting to belong, to having belonging and being long and being with people, and this sense of having. And so then we wrote a letter to our past or our future selves. And one thing that I wrote down that has really stuck out to me is, don't forget how impossible things feel when you haven't done them yet. Because I wrote it to my future self, and I was like, as the me who is here and not in that situation, but is closer to the past me who had all of these fears and all of these pains and that kind of thing, don't forget how impossible things feel when you haven't done them yet, all the way to the flotilla, and how impossible. So, but when you have love, you can dream of something beyond the impossible and go, yeah, that hasn't been done yet. Yeah, that hasn't been done yet. It might be impossible because it hasn't been done yet. A world where everyone is fed and safe may not have been done yet. It may feel impossible because it hasn't been done yet. But that was just something that really stuck out to me during Circle. And I end up having this opportunity to go and stay on this peninsula near here. And when I get there, they tell me I'm picked as guest of the day and lead me to Ocean View Suite 222, and because I was upgraded and it was 222, and like how much everything around me was about vulnerability and trusting, and how much relationships, two being like, so if one is me, then two is dynamic, and this other person, right? That I'm working with, the co-creation, because that's it. You create your reality, but you're also co-creating with everyone else, creating their realities. And so you're the one, but then also is the two, and that's what so much of this Aries and Libra dynamic has been about. And that goes into just where I am now under this Aries full moon. So then is there, whenever I'm in this beautiful 222 suite, it was the solar eclipse in Virgo and the fall equinox, and I had my moon magic journal, and it was just so crazy. And it was International Day of Peace. So 2 weeks after learning about vulnerability, it's the eclipse and the fall equinox, International Day of Peace. And oh yeah, because it was the Pisces lunar eclipse, and so this was the solar eclipse in Virgo. And it felt like the experience of a lifetime, and I had so much fun and just learned so much, really connected with myself. I was able to reflect a lot on just how amazing it was that I was here, especially as I was doing my moon magic journal, because I'm thinking back to the beginning of the year when none of this was even possible, was even in my mind, like to any degree. Okay, so back to this project that came about this is definitely where I'm going to keep some stuff private because I don't want to get into anything, sharing it about anyone. But there were a lot of opportunities where I learned so much, and then there were also some opportunities where I learned the first case is I learned so much about something new and trying something new. And the other side of it was learning so much about how easy miscommunication can be when you're trying to do something, and just a place for boundaries. And where I was really letting boundaries start to slip and betraying, which is think of as betraying myself. So I'm letting go of betraying myself, right? As part of the lesson that's coming up around vulnerability and de-armoring, making sure that I do what's best for me, that I know in that moment. And from that place, love others and take care of others, putting on my mask first and then helping others with theirs. And so I find myself starting to betray myself as far as different things of like where my intuition was like, maybe, but I didn't have super clarity, and like where I was, yeah, just starting to push through on some different things until I was like, okay, I'm noticing this pattern start to come up. Show me if this is for me or not. And then immediately found out it was not for me, and walked away gracefully. And it really helped to have other people to talk to about this experience. And it showed me that my intuition was right about a lot of things where I had been kind of starting to not. And so interesting to see when it was easy to follow my intuition and when it wasn't, and how in strengthening those situations where it did not feel like my intuition was very strong has helped me feel much more connected to my intuition overall and really leaning into the magic. And so here at this point, I'm really surrendering into vulnerability and being open. And what I'm realizing is that when you surrender to life and you let yourself be very spontaneous, like I mentioned at this beginning of this episode, be very spontaneous, then things can unfold that you couldn't have planned for, beyond what you could have planned for. And I'm going to kind of talk about that in the next episode. What I have this idea that I've been thinking about a lot that I'm excited to share about, but I wanted to share this story first. When you're totally surrendered and you're just letting love lead and you're following your intuition and doing things because of the reason of this is how I feel, this is how I think, this is how I want to share, this is what I want to make, then things can unfold beyond what you could have planned. And so that's really where, okay, yeah, so here now I have the next page is blank. I'll probably write about how good this episode felt to make. And I'll write about this whole story this weekend. So then the other friend who I didn't get to go out with dinner with in from my trompeta class, the other friend, and I'm sure they'd be fine if I used their names, but I don't want to do it without asking. And so we'll call her island friend. Okay. And this is where we go back to what dream did I start with on September 7th? I'm in the islands in this turquoise water with white sand next to me going, what did I say? Aren't you glad we made it here? Aren't you glad we made it to the islands? Okay. So this friend, she had been in Cali doing salsa, and then she was going to fly back here, had maybe 48 hours before she was going to fly on to her next destination. And so she was going to be in Cartagena for just a minute because she'd already booked her other flight out of here weeks ago. And so we're we go for lunch and we're talking and we have such a great time talking, and she was like, I was thinking of going to the islands. And I was like, man, that sounds good. You're always gonna find me willing if it comes to going to the islands, going to the beach. And so we find this, and she was like, we were looking at some hotels because she hadn't booked her hotel yet for these 2 nights. And she was like, yeah, I'm looking at this one. I might get this. But then we start checking out some of the islands, and we found this amazing deal at this one place. And so we go, and we're like, oh, okay, maybe we'll do it for the second night and find something here. But there was one boat out at 5 p.m. This is like 3:45 p.m. We're looking at our phones, and there's one boat left at 5 p.m. and it's like 15-20 minutes from and we just like, yes, 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 like this sounds great, let's book it. So we booked it for 2 nights, and we get on the and then as we're like hauling her stuff out of, because we had just come from the airport to a cafe like that's right out there. So we go from the airport to where I'm staying, and she drops off her bags and just packs just enough for the islands. And we go basically have a sunset cruise out to this island and had an amazing dinner. And I am in turquoise water with these white sands, like completely spontaneously, with a friend who I didn't even know yet whenever I had that dream, because Champetta was like 2 or 3 days after that. And so I'm with this friend who I hadn't even met yet. We're in the islands. We're having an amazing time. The water was beautiful. Everyone was so kind. Let's see, I've been chatting for a while, so I don't know that I'll get into how beautiful it was, but we kept on. And she was a great mirror in this, as far as just noticing, like, being spontaneous and how alive you feel and how surrendered you feel, because she is in the middle of an unknown. She has just had to literally like demolish her dreams with her bare hands, literally. And so she's in this completely like reinventing herself state. And all the way to her story, vulnerability and de-armoring, if she had not pursued that dream that she had to then tear down, it's like, maybe I'll ask her, would you have built that? I'm sure she would say yes. Yes, I would have still done it for those 15 years that I had that amazing dream. Though it had plenty of the rose and the thorn. She could talk about the rose part of it for sure as her dream, but there was many, many a thorn that came along with it that she's feeling liberated from and free from. So you go back to vulnerability and de-armoring, this sense of like, would you have still built it if you'd known you have to tear it down yourself? Like, and I bet I'll put words in her mouth, but I bet she would say yes, because here we are. Look, she gets a brand new start. She gets a brand new start. And even all the way with the flotilla, that this collectively, we get a brand new start at trying to be loving humans to each other who take care of each other. And so what she and I kept on saying was, uh tengo. So like, we have, I have, meaning like she and I are both in this I have place, like I talked about, where the past was I want, and I feel like this is the era of I have. And we were just so grateful. And I'm under this Aries full moon. I see it rising. It's almost full. And so while we were there, just this beautiful moon over the water, beautiful beaches, I'm having the time of my life. It was truly like the experience of a lifetime. Same with the other one that I was at on the solar eclipse. Just so I'm just so grateful. And I guess looking at it, yeah, it's letting the magic unfold, the vulnerability and the de-armoring, because that's that alchemy. When you are the alchemist, you know that no matter how the wheel of life turns, no matter what is going to happen to you in your life, you're going to turn it into love. And it's going to come through you as love, and it's going to be love, and it's going to be amazing. Everything that happened down to that project, that all literally within, from whenever I started this story, September 7th, through till now, October 5th, at that point, I didn't even know it. And it has since come and gone. And at one point, it was consuming all of my mind and stuff, all of my thinking. And now it's a story from the past, though my relationships with some people from it are still growing and moving forward. So there's always something still to be had. Like, in that, I'm completely glad that I was vulnerable and that I did not put up a guard. But as soon as I felt a doubt or noticed, it was actually noticing myself repeating patterns of people pleasing and self betrayal, I was like, okay, this isn't for me. And, or well, I asked for like, make it something to happen that makes it really clear if this is for me or not. And it happened within 24 hours. So that's it. That's part two for vulnerability and de-armoring. I don't necessarily have a practice or like an action or a takeaway. Here, let's see what comes to my mind. I think of especially just the muscle testing and where are you going to listen to your intuition and where are you listening to your intuition? Maybe this is the reflection practice. Where are you listening to your intuition and listening to love or listening to fear? Because they can sound really similar, especially if you're not used to checking in with which one is it. And I asked a tarot reader in Salem that one time. And I was like, how do you tell whenever it's fear? And how do you tell whenever it's your intuition? And she said, whenever it's your intuition, it comes from your heart. And whenever it's fear, you feel it in your gut. And I found that to be pretty true, though people call it a gut feeling. I do, and I am especially connected to my heart. If you listen to the episode where I talk about why I see my heart as an opal, and when I envision my heart, I envision an opal. Oh, okay, hold on. That's part of the island story. I'm like sitting in the dark at this point. Yeah, well. Um, Part of this island story is Ezekiel, a man named Ezekiel, which I looked up on just whenever I was saying goodbye to my friend at the airport, just because so we go to the island for these 2 days. We're already back and she's on a plane, gone now. And I just had such an amazing spontaneous 2 days with her. And so then back to it, it's, oh, aren't you glad we made it to the islands? I didn't say those words verbatim, but I said almost identically that sentence to her. And so that's wild to me. I didn't even know her whenever I wrote about that dream. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, Ezekiel. That was someone we met on the island. And so as I was saying goodbye to her, I looked up the Bible story Ezekiel, and it's one of the most mystical Bible stories. And he's very vision. He has a lot of visions. And his first vision is of I want to say it's whatever he sees has this aura around them like a rainbow. And I think it's so interesting because a rainbow is like the opal, and it's like this opal, and I always see myself in my heart expand on the inhale, like charging up the opal, and on the exhale sending it out and like letting that fill up my aura and fill up my space. So there's a practice for you. If you ever want to connect to love, connect to that vulnerability, connect to that intuition, go into your heart, see if maybe an opal connects for you. Maybe there's a different stone, maybe a different symbol or something that connects to you and that you think of as your heart, and you breathe into that heart, that power source, that love, and then you exhale and you send it out. That's the creation and the co-creation, right? Are you sending out love or are you sending out fear? Are you seeing love or are you seeing fear? And so really, oh, and one other thing about Ezekiel, I guess there are also these wheels with eyes. And that was something that my therapist told me that she had had in her dream was this, there's a name for it. I should have looked it up before I started. Oh, well. It's this name for this, yeah, being that has appeared in visions, which is wheels, a bunch of wheels interconnected, or maybe it can be just one wheel, but with of eyes. So eyes that are going in these wheels and they're spinning. And she had told me about a dream where she saw one of those. And so that's funny that that was also in Ezekiel's first dream. And that was someone we had this amazing, amazing adventure on the island with, someone who had lived his whole life there. And he taught us so much and we had such a fun day. And so to have Ezekiel as this mirror on this island in the middle of spontaneity and dreaming about love and vulnerability, really, really fascinating. So I hope you enjoyed my story. I'm curious to know what you liked most or what you related to, or if you've had any experiences around vulnerability and de-armoring and choosing love and how to choose love. Maybe that'll be part three, is if enough people share their stories and experiences with me around learning to de-armor. And oh my gosh, I learned the term de-armoring in a course on the cervix. It was, I forget her name, but her name, the course name was called Self Cervix, and it was about connecting with your cervix. And after my last relationship ended, what now, 2 years, just over 2 years ago, I did that course and it helped me heal my relationship with my sexuality and my sexual power and stuff. So going back to the IUD dream, and like that being in the cervix. And the whole idea of de-armoring I learned from this course, and the way that she talked about it was that de-armoring is that ability to be open, and that the cervix is linked to the spinal cord, I believe. And so it's the way that people say like men are ruled by their dicks or whatever. In a way, women are by their cervix. Like both, it's we have the brain up here and the brain down there, and it'd be literally as far as the spinal, like the nervous system goes, and where our nerve endings and stuff are, and the cervix. So de-arm, the reason so many women don't have sensation there or can't feel certain like pleasure to certain degrees is because of the armoring, especially around the cervix, because you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to let in. But once you start to trust your power and step into your power, you actually really do know when to be open and when not to, and what how you will be safe, and that you will be safe, and that you trust because you belong, and everything's working out for you, and that, like I keep on saying chica suerte, like I feel like such a lucky girl with all of these experiences. But that's also the alchemy of it all, because I know myself to be a lucky girl. Also, everything that happens to me, because there are a lot of decisions I could have made. Let me finish the sentence. Everything that happens to me, I turn into something that works out for me, because there are a lot of decisions that I could have made about different things in here that would not have led to, I mean, I can't say exactly what they would have led to, but they wouldn't have led to what has happened. And so, and I'm so grateful for everything that has happened, and how beautiful and it has been, like experiences of a lifetime. And so, yeah, that proper burial for freedom, for freedom. And that's a word that's been coming up a lot lately: liberation, right? Freedom, thinking all the way back to why I think the humanitarian flotilla was so beautiful, because they're fighting for people's freedom, people who should not be oppressed in this way, who are having their freedom taken from them. It's we're not, none of us are free in this world until all of us are free. That's the you have, I have, we have. So here is to moving into a world where that is the case, and to the de-armoring. Ooh, that's an interesting word whenever you think of like all the wars and everything, right? De-armoring, because it makes it sound, it's, and that's why I think most people don't want to do that, because it makes you think that you're defenseless. It's like would be the connotation that it, like you're defenseless against stuff, de-armored. But it depends on how much you trust and believe in love, because that's the choice that you're making, to choose love over fear. And so if you choose love, do you trust the love to keep you safe? And what does that mean for love to keep you safe if you're an alchemist and you can transmute anything? So that's vulnerability and de-armoring part 2. I love you.